You did not arrive at this moment by accident. Something inside you has already shifted, quietly, beneath the noise of your surroundings. Before anyone noticed, before you even questioned why things felt hollow, your perception began moving to a rhythm most people cannot sense. Conversations that once held weight now echo with repetition, and familiar places feel smaller than they did yesterday. There is a subtle tension, almost imperceptible, pressing against the edges of routine. You try to ignore it, to lose yourself in busyness, yet it lingers, persistent, insistent, without words. Somewhere in the spaces between your attention, you notice patterns that no one else acknowledges. The world moves forward, yet you feel as if you are floating slightly ahead, suspended in a current others cannot see. And still, the moment is unresolved, waiting, unfolding quietly just beneath awareness. This awareness does not arrive as revelation. It emerges in fragments, a pause too long in a conversation, a glance that feels heavier than it should, the sensation that the shape of life around you is repeating itself without variation. You may feel a slight detachment, as if your internal system is observing rather than participating, yet participation still occurs out of habit. Emotions that once swept through you now arrive slower, filtered, almost distant. You do not react the way you once did. Situations that demanded tension before now pass through your perception lightly, without insistence. In this quiet noticing, you recognize that the world around you hums at a frequency you no longer inhabit fully. And within that realization, there is both restlessness and relief, a gentle insistence that something internal has begun to shift. The surface remains familiar, yet beneath it, subtle currents are rearranging themselves quietly, without announcement. Time feels altered in these moments. Not faster, not slower, just less tethered to the usual pressures. Deadlines feel manufactured. Urgency, once instinctive, now appears as noise rather than necessity. Even conversations carry a strange weight. They repeat patterns, but your response no longer mirrors expectation. You notice how people defend old versions of themselves, how words once charged with meaning now land without resonance. There is a growing clarity, not sharp or sudden, but stabilizing, almost like a deepening stillness in the center of your perception. Your body registers it before your mind does, a quiet calibration, subtle yet persistent. And in that calibration, you feel the gentle isolation of being slightly ahead, hovering above cycles that everyone else continues to follow. Yet this distance does not demand action. It simply exists. The shift within you carries a subtle weight. You may catch yourself observing emotional loops in others, patterns of reaction that once compelled you to act or respond. Now, those loops feel distant, almost transparent, as if you can see the mechanism but no longer need to operate it. You are still present, still moving through familiar spaces, yet a quiet neutrality settles between you and the currents around you. Silence becomes more communicative than words. Presence, more stabilizing than explanation. You begin noticing how little effort is required to maintain coherence internally, even when the world outside continues to churn and amplify. And in that noticing, curiosity mixes with an undercurrent of disquiet, a sense that something is forming, but without urgency or name. You may find solitude appearing naturally, not as withdrawal, but as necessity. Crowds feel heavier. Noise feels intrusive. Even habitual digital routines begin to feel like friction. This is not avoidance. It is integration. Your internal system requires space to settle, to map new rhythms of awareness. Moments of quiet observation reveal that emotional reactions are loosening their grip. You see yourself responding selectively rather than automatically. The familiar hooks of tension, approval, and conflict no longer direct your internal compass. This recalibration is gentle but unmistakable, a subtle repositioning within your own nervous system. And even as the external world remains unchanged, internally, the landscape is reorganizing, still unannounced, still unfolding, quietly significant. The presence you carry begins to extend without effort. Not as influence, not as control, but as resonance. Others may sense it without understanding why. Situations shift subtly, without explicit intervention. You notice the contrast. Some around you continue in patterns unchanged, while your perception moves ahead, anchored in clarity. Action arises naturally, without internal friction. Words are chosen without compulsion. Silence holds its own weight. The quiet tension from the opening moments, once unresolved, begins to integrate with your awareness. There is no fanfare, no announcement, only the unfolding recognition that the internal shift has found a subtle home. You are aware, fully present, yet without expectation. And in this unfolding, the original moment, the hook of quiet dissonance, of subtle restlessness, softly resolves into continuity. You move through the world with attention, yet without attachment. Clarity has become the medium through which presence flows. Patterns no longer pull at you unconsciously. Observation and engagement coexist without conflict. The environment responds differently, not because of effort, but because internal coherence holds steadily. You notice the effect, yet no one confirms it aloud. There is only the quiet hum of alignment, a state that continues without demand, without closure. The shift does not end, it simply persists. And within that persistence, the realization settles. You were quietly awake all along.